The East Coast-West Coast war didn't start the night the news cameras showed 2 caskets. It didn't start with diss tracks, magazine covers, or angry radio interviews. The truth is far darker than that. That feud, the one that swallowed hip-hop whole and took 2 megastars with it, was born years earlier in a narrow hallway of a Harlem recording studio, long before anyone understood the consequences. Most people know the war. Almost no one knows the spark. I was there for the moment. Everything shifted. A night when loyalty turned into leverage, when friendship turned into threat, and when one man's hunger for control began to twist the future of music itself. I didn't realize until it was too late that the real feud, the one the world still debates today, didn't begin on the streets of New York or Los Angeles. It began behind a locked door at Quad Studios, and I was standing on the wrong side of it. I didn't come to Harlem that morning planning to face the past. At least that's what I told myself. But memory has its own map, and sometimes, without warning, it leads you back to the one place you've spent half your life trying to avoid. I'm in my early 40s now, but Harlem still feels like the neighborhood that raised me. The same cracked sidewalks, the same cold wind rushing between the brownstones, the same vendors shouting over each other in voices I haven't heard since the 90s. A lot has changed, sure. Cafes where corner stores used to be, condos where vacant lots sat for decades. But the heartbeat, that rhythm you feel in your chest when you walk 7th Avenue, that stays the same. I was heading uptown on a quiet weekday morning when I turned a corner and froze. My breath caught. My chest tightened. There it was. The old Quad Studios building, except now it had a slick new name, a polished glass sign, and a lobby that looked too clean, too modern, too unaware of what happened inside its walls. But the bricks were the same, and bricks don't forget. I stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the building I hadn't looked at in nearly 30 years. Most people passing by never knew what happened there. Most probably never would, but I did. I remember as a kid thinking buildings held memories, that if something intense happened inside them, the walls absorbed it. When I got older, I stopped believing stuff like that. Life beat the magic out of me. Until that night in 1994, the night that building swallowed a moment and never let it go. I stepped closer, almost without meaning to, and placed my hand on the cold metal frame of the door. And right then, right in that instant, the city noise softened, like someone slowly turning down the volume of the world. And I was back, 21 again, a nobody working for Bad Boy Records, doing whatever anyone told me. Fetching food, grabbing tapes, making calls, staying late, staying invisible. That was my whole job. Don't be seen. Don't be heard. Just exist in the spaces between the stars. And in 1994, there were no bigger rising stars than Biggie and Pac. People today think the story started with anger, with conflict, with insults on wax. They're wrong. The truth, the real truth, started with love, not romantic love. Brotherhood, respect, genuine excitement for another man's success. Pac loved Biggie's rise. I mean, really loved it. We used to ride around after sessions, blasting the early mixtapes Pac kept in his car, the stuff the world never heard. He'd play them loudly, bobbing his head, looking over at us with this giant grin like he'd discovered buried treasure. "Y'all hear this?" he'd say. "Big is next, I'm telling you." Pac didn't see Big as competition. He saw him as family. And when Pac got the phone call about Big having an album release party in New York, I remember the exact way his face lit up. "We going to that," he said. "All of us. That's my man. I gotta be there." I've never seen someone more excited for someone else's success. Pac gave Big opportunities people didn't know about. Took him on tour, let him open the shows, pushed him into rooms that were hard to get into. Pac didn't care about the politics. He moved with heart. And Big felt that. "He's one of the only people I trust," Big said. Then he sighed, heavy. like the weight of being famous at 22 was starting to crush him. I wish Puff was more like that. He didn't explain it first, but I'd seen it with my own eyes. Puff hated how close Pac and Big were getting. He'd never admit that. Not then, not now. But jealousy doesn't always speak. Sometimes it just watches. The thing about Puff, there was a presence around him. Not supernatural, nothing like that. Just pressure. Like the air changed when he walked into a room. He needed control, total control, of the music, of the brand, of the people, especially Biggie. "You're my artist," I once overheard him say. "You're my best friend. I pay you. I make hits with you." But Pac didn't need him. Pac didn't play by the industry rules. Pac refused to let Puff mold him, and that scared Puff more than anyone realized. Because if Pac could win without him, what did that say about Puff's power? It was around that time that Puff started watching Pac differently. Not with anger, with calculation. A marketing man who couldn't market him. A manipulator who couldn't manipulate him. A boss who couldn't own him. And Big saw it too, even if he never said it directly. Weeks before the night, everything changed. Big told me something quietly. "There's this tension between Pac and Puff," he said. "Pac ain't trying to work with him, not like that. He's focused on me, on Brooklyn. Puff don't like that." I didn't know what to do with that information. I was a kid in the background, holding coats, running errands, trying not to get fired. But looking back now, older, calmer, understanding things I didn't have the language for then. That tension, that invisible crack in the foundation, it was already spreading through the building, through the crew, through the industry. And on the night Pac came to Quad Studios, months before the shooting people think started everything, that presence around Puff was stronger than ever. As I stood outside the old building today, hand pressed against the door, I felt something tight coil in my stomach. Not fear, recognition. Because I now know what I didn't understand then. That night wasn't the beginning of a feud. It was the climax of something much quieter, much older, and much darker. And if I had trusted the feeling in my chest, I would have walked away before I ever stepped inside. The hallway in Quad didn't look like much in 1994. Cracked paint, buzzing lights, posters peeling off the walls. But that night it felt tighter than usual. The kind of tight that makes your shoulders tense without knowing why. I was carrying a tray stacked with empty drink cups, trying not to spill anything as I nudged open the door to the small lounge room. Big was sitting there alone on this sagging leather couch that had been shedding flakes for months. He looked tired, not physically, but like the weight of something invisible was pressing down on him. He didn't notice me at first, so I moved quietly, setting the tray aside. Big usually had a kind of presence. Even sitting, he felt larger than everyone else in the room. But that night he looked smaller, shoulders hunched, fingers tapping restlessly against his thigh. "You good?" I asked. He didn't look up right away. When he finally did, his eyes were distant, unfocused, like he was halfway in the booth and halfway in his own thoughts. "Close the door," he murmured. I did gently. Big leaned back, rubbing his face with both hands. "Man, I'm tired." At first I thought he meant the grind, late nights, nonstop sessions, back-to-back writing. But something in his voice said it wasn't just that. "I feel like I'm always needed," he continued. "Every day, every hour. Verse here, feature there, show there. Puff want this, the label want that. Ain't even been a year and it feel like 10. He shook his head slowly. "It's like all this is happening fast. Too fast." I nodded, even though I didn't know what fast felt like at his level. I was still the guy running for sandwiches and blank tapes. Big leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. Sometimes it feel like Puff got a picture in his head of who I'm supposed to be. And I'm trying to keep up, but he shrugged. "I ain't built to run every minute of the day." He paused, glancing toward the door. "And Pac coming through? Puff acting different about that too. This was the first time Big had ever hinted at tension between them. He didn't say more, didn't complain, didn't gossip, but the shift in his voice told me his mind was already spinning. I didn't press him. I never pressed Big. We sat in silence for maybe 10 seconds before he exhaled and leaned back again. "You know C-Mac?" he asked. I nodded. LA been sniffing around him. Couple people out there want to take him in a whole different direction. Don't tell nobody that, he said. Just something I heard. His face tightened. People start looking outside the circle. Puff don't like that, not one bit. Before I could respond, a shadow cut across the doorway. I didn't have to turn around. I could feel him. Puff. He stepped into the room with a sharpness that sucked the air out of it. He wasn't the suit-wearing mogul he'd later become. He was younger, hungrier, moving with the kind of restless determination you only see in people who believe nothing is promised unless they take it. He didn't greet Big, he didn't smile. He just stared at me and jerked his chin toward the hallway. "Come here a minute." I followed him out, the door closing softly behind us. The hallway felt colder immediately. Maybe it was the draft from the stairwell, or maybe it was Puff himself. He had this way of pulling the temperature down without saying anything. "You know Pac's stopping through," he said after a moment. I nodded. "He want to play some joints, look over some stuff, that's fine." Puff swallowed once, jaw tight. "But I don't want tonight turning into a circus. Too many people, too many egos, too much noise." He stepped closer, and I could smell the faint burn of his cologne mixing with the old building. "You stay close," he said. "I don't want you running around, disappearing, going off track." His tone wasn't angry. It was controlled, measured. Puff was always calculating, but tonight his eyes had a different edge. Sharper, faster, scanning the hallway, like he expected someone to materialize out of the shadows. I shifted toward the elevator, thinking I still needed to grab something for the booth, but Puff swiveled his head toward me instantly. "You don't need the elevator," he said quietly. No threat, no explanation, but the message locked into my nerves like a pin. I stepped back. Puff turned his gaze toward the elevator doors anyway, staring at them too long, like he was waiting for a moment he already knew was coming. It was subtle, but something in the way he watched those doors made my stomach twist. A mix of anticipation and dread. Like he'd rehearsed the night in his mind and was checking to make sure reality matched. He finally walked away, leaving me standing alone in the flickering hallway. The silence pressed against my ears heavier than before. I went back into the lounge. Big looked up immediately. He could read my face better than I realized. "What did he say?" I swallowed, just making sure everything's smooth. Big studied me, then nodded slowly. But neither of us spoke again, because even though the night was young, the walls felt like they'd started leaning in, and the presence, not supernatural, not mystical, just the psychological weight Puff carried. It was tightening, like the building itself knew something we didn't. I needed air, real air, not the recycled heat from Quad's old vents, not the smell of ashtrays and burnt wiring. Something outside, something that didn't belong to Puff. I stepped into the hallway and started toward the stairwell, just far enough to shake off the tension tightening across my chest. But before I made it 5 steps, a voice echoed down the hallway. "Where are you going?" I froze. Puff stepped out from the shadows near the elevator, like he'd been waiting for me to try leaving. His hands were in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, too sharp. Eyes that measured every move you made before you made it. "I'm just grabbing some air," I said quietly. Puff nodded, slow and thoughtful, then gestured for me to come closer. "Walk with me." I didn't want to, but some people you don't say no to, not in 1994, not in his building. I walked over to him. He looked up and down the hallway, making sure no one was listening, then leaned back against the wall. "You know something?" Puff said. His voice was calm, almost warm, but the warmth felt artificial, practiced. I love that boy. I blinked, unsure if he meant big or pack. He clarified. Big, he said. He's my best friend, my brother, my whole everything. He smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile you see on someone holding something fragile and refusing to let it go. I'm doing everything for him, Puff continued. Everything. There's nothing I won't do for Biggie. Nothing. I'll put him on the map. I'll protect him. I'll build an empire around him. He looked at me like he wanted to make sure I understood. I make him, Puff said quietly. I shape him. That's my job. Something in my stomach nodded. He wasn't talking about friendship. He wasn't talking about family. He wasn't even talking about loyalty. He was talking about ownership, like Biggie was an item, a brand, a product. You feel me? He asked. I nodded slowly, even though my throat was dry. Puff turned toward the elevator, staring at the metal doors like they were mirrors showing him the future he wanted. He's mine, Puff said. My artist, my responsibility, my investment, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure nothing gets in the way of that. The hallway felt colder, quieter, like the ventilation system stopped breathing. I didn't move, couldn't move, because for the first time that night, I felt something deeper than tension, something darker. And it wasn't supernatural, it wasn't mystical. It was the feeling of standing beside a man who believed people were possessions. Before I could respond, an intern burst out from the stairwell. Yo, Puff, Pac is here, he said, breathless. I'm gonna go get him. The intern hurried toward the elevator, jabbing the call button repeatedly. Puff didn't move. Neither did I. The elevator dinged softly. The doors slid open. 3 men stepped out. Not Pac, not anyone we recognized. They looked serious, not angry, not frantic, just serious in a way that made the intern's smile vanish instantly. One of the men held up a hand. Don't move. The hallway froze. Me. The intern. Puff. All 3 of us stood like statues. The building felt like it was holding its breath again, but this time even the walls seemed scared. Puff straightened, adjusting his jacket slightly as if preparing for a photograph. Then he whispered, almost to himself, almost to me, but loud enough for the air to hear, I'll do anything for my best friend. The words hit colder than the draft rolling down the hallway. The 3 men pushed past us without another word, heading toward the stairwell. No one spoke. Not me, not the intern, not even Puff. Then, from somewhere far below, a sound cracked through the building. Pop. A second. Pop. A third. Fourth. Fifth. Louder. Closer. Final. Gunshots. The hallway erupted into movement. The intern screamed. Someone down the hall shouted. Doors slammed open. I ran, not because of bravery, but instinct, pushing toward the nearest window overlooking the street. My hand slapped against the cold glass as I looked down, and there he was, 2 Pac, on the pavement, clutching his side, eyes blazing with fury and pain, blood soaked through his shirt. A man tried to help him up, but Pac shoved him away, screaming toward the doorway of the building. You shot me! You shot me! They shot me! They shot me! His voice was raw, hysterical, echoing up through the brick alley like it was bouncing through a tunnel made of fear. A car screeched up beside him, tires screaming. Hands grabbed him, dragging him into the back seat as Pac kept pointing, cursing, shouting. They shot me. They shot me. I know who did this. The door slammed. The car peeled off, fishtailing before speeding toward 7th Avenue, toward the hospital, toward the beginning of everything the world would later misunderstand. I stood frozen, palms pressed to the glass, breath fogging the window. Beside me, the intern trembled. Behind me, I felt him before I turned. Puff, standing still, expression unreadable, eyes cold and unbroken. I didn't know what he was thinking. I didn't know what he understood. I only knew that nothing, absolutely nothing, about what happened tonight surprised him. Not the men, not the elevator, not the gunshots, not Pac's scream, nothing. Because long before the bullets, long before the shouting, long before the hospital, Puff had already told me what mattered most. Big is mine. And now, standing in that hallway, shivering from something colder than winter air, I finally understood what those words really meant. I left New York a week after Pac got shot. Not because I wanted to, not because I planned it, but because sometimes life forces you out of a place before you understand why. Quad Studios changed me in a way I didn't have words for back then. After that night, the walls felt tight. The hallways felt dangerous. The people I used to admire suddenly looked at each other differently. Suspicion replacing excitement, fear replacing trust. And Puff, he didn't say a word to me after the shooting. Not one word. Not thank you for staying late. Not you good. Not even don't talk. Nothing. He just looked at me once, a quick glance. And in that glance, I knew my time there was over. Because Puff wasn't a man who needed to threaten you out loud. His silence did the job for him. I packed my things quietly. A duffel bag, a notebook, a few tapes, nothing else. And without telling anyone, I walked out of Bad Boy and out of New York. The only place I had to go was Minnesota, where my great aunt lived. A quiet woman who grew tomatoes in pots and believed God spoke in the wind. She didn't ask many questions when I showed up. She just pointed to a small room at the back of her house and said, "You can rest here." And for months, that's all I did. I slept longer than I'd slept in years. I walked around lakes. I learned to breathe again. I learned to exist without jumping when a door slammed. But even from Minnesota, the East Coast-West Coast tension followed me like a storm cloud drifting across the whole country. I saw the interviews. I heard the radio shots. I watched the headlines mutate into violence. People acted like this rivalry came out of nowhere. But I knew the truth. It started the moment Pac hit that pavement screaming, "They shot me," not because he was wrong, not because he was right, but because he believed it. And the whole world believed him. And the person who could have calmed everything down chose not to. Puff doubled down. Pac fired back from LA. Biggie kept quiet until quiet turned into tension. And everyone watching from a distance, including me, felt like we were watching a slow motion collision we couldn't stop. Minnesota gave me peace, but not clarity. That came years later. Clarity comes with age, with distance, with hindsight. And it hit me hardest the first time I came back to Harlem in my 40s and walked past Quad Studios again. Older, calmer, finally able to see everything through the eyes of someone who made it out. I stood on the same sidewalk, stared at the same bricks, listened to the same city hum. Except this time, I understood something I didn't understand back then. The person who lit the match was the same person who wanted to own the fire. Puff Daddy, back then just Puff, didn't pull any triggers. He didn't have to. That was never his way. He used something more dangerous than violence. He used control. He controlled the narrative, controlled the studio, controlled Big's rise, controlled who came in, who came out, who belonged, who didn't. And Pac was the one person he couldn't control, which made Pac the one person he needed out of the way. Not dead, not injured, just out of the circle. And when Pac got shot in that lobby, something in Puff's eyes that night at Quad told me he wasn't surprised, not relieved, not guilty, just ready. As if he'd been waiting for the universe to make a decision for him. As if chaos was simply another marketing pivot. It took me decades to realize that everything I saw that night, every look, every silence, every command, every blocked doorway, every chilling comment was part of a bigger truth. Puff didn't start a rivalry. He engineered a vacuum, and once it opened, the whole industry got sucked into it. Standing outside the building now, in the present, I run my hand across the metal door frame again. The coldness of it shoots through my palm. The wind hits differently at 40 than it did at 21. It carries memory now. It carries truth. I stare up at the windows, the same ones I once pressed my hands against as packs screamed for help. And I finally accept what I spent years avoiding. I'm the only one who can finish the story. Not because I'm special, not because I'm brave, but because I am still alive. And everyone else who could tell it is either gone or silent or won't dare to say what they saw. Puff Daddy, Sean Combs, whatever name he carries now, started something he never intended to finish. And the only way to close it is to tell the truth, to say what I saw, to say what I felt, to say what the walls of that building absorbed and never released. So here I am, back where it all started, back where the world changed, back where the first spark lit a fire that burned through music history. And I'm telling it because someone has to, because someone always does, because silence is how men like Puff stay in control. And truth is the only thing that breaks that control in half. I take one last look at the building, breathing it in like smoke from a long dead fire. Then I turn toward the camera, toward whoever is on the other side of this story, and I speak the final words I never thought I'd say out loud. If you're hearing this, you're now part of the truth too. If you want more stories like this, the truth behind the shadows, make sure you like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Check the pinned comment. I'll be down there replying.